So you've all heard it before, your shutter speed should be twice your frame rate, the 180-degree rule. If you shoot at 25 frames, your shutter speed should be 1/50. But today, we're going to go over 3 different instances where you should break that rule. You better like the video because I actually broke a ruler. Welcome back to another Quick Tip Tuesdays. My name is Camilla for DKD21 Media. If you're new to the channel, I talk about filmmaking tips, tutorials, and sometimes I teach you guys how to improve your production quality. So if that's something you're into, consider subscribing. So if you don't know much about the 180-degree rule, the reason we follow it is to give a realistic amount of motion blur when we are filming our footage. If we film at 25 frames per second and our shutter speed is at 1/50, we get motion blur that looks like this. That is very realistic to what we see through our human eye. If we crank this up, it looks a bit more jittery, and if we crank this down, it's all very slow and dreamlike, and it's very weird. And this rule is talked about a lot in filmmaking and cinematography, and what a lot of filmmakers are being encouraged to do. But the first way that I actually encourage you not to follow this rule is when you are going to be doing some motion tracking. So when you do motion tracking on software like After Effects, the software is basically looking at different frames for the same thing that you have pointed out. Say for example, you want to track this part of a phone and you have your shutter speed at 1/50 because you're following the 180-degree shutter speed rule. And say you move your phone quite fast, as you can see frame by frame, you're going to experience a lot of motion blur, which means that the software is going to struggle a lot when it comes to recognizing the points and then helping you track. And that actually causes a massive headache when you're going to track an object. In the first episode of Unscrambling the Edit, I messed this up at the beginning because I didn't apply that principle, and so I struggled a lot when I was trying to track my watch in one of the bicep curl scenes, which added another hour to the editing process. I had to re-track it manually. So if you're shooting at 25 frames per second and you want to do some motion tracking, start at minimum 1/100th of a second, and then maybe have a look at the footage. Depending on how fast you're moving, you might want to increase that. So the second instance when you want to break this rule is when you're going to film high-paced scenes. So the consequence of shooting at a high frame rate is that your footage looks very jittery. It looks like things are moving really fast and very unnatural. And sometimes this is very good, especially if you're shooting music videos or if you're shooting a scene where there's a fight going on and you want it to really dramatize the effect. If you combine this with some handheld camera shakes, then you have a perfect jittery experience. And this is because it makes the viewers kind of uncomfortable. It makes everything seem like it's going faster than it actually is. So in the film Saving Private Ryan, they actually did this. They shot at a 45-degree shutter angle, which is roughly 1/200th of a second, if my maths is correct. JK, I actually just did the maths beforehand. And this allowed for particle and debris to be seen very clearly, and to give that kind of jittery effect the whole way through. You would see everything and it wasn't covered up in motion blur, which goes on to our next and final instance when you don't want to follow the 180-degree shutter rule, and that is when you want to capture details in your shots that may be lost because of motion blur. So we take this typical shot of a jug pouring water. This is shot at 25 frames per second at 1/50th of shutter speed. However, if I crank this shutter speed up to 1/100 and then again, you can see the differences as you go up. At 1/250, you can clearly see the particles of the water. If you're going for an effect where you need to see things much more clearly, that is going to work. Here's another example where I'm moving a logo across the screen, but as you can see, if we follow the 180-degree rule, it's very hard to make out the logo. However, if I increase the shutter speed, you can see the logo much clearer. Essentially, this increases the sharpness of your shots when motion blur isn't really a key factor. So the whole point of this video was not to tell you exactly when and where you should increase your shutter speed, but to give you ideas of scenarios when you can change them. You have the ability to choose how you want to film stuff, and if changing your shutter speed might give you a better effect than if you didn't, then why not? Regardless, I hope that this video helped you out. If you like this video, make sure you leave it a like so other people can see it. And if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. I'm happy to answer them because I read every single comment. And if you want to see more videos about filmmaking, editing, and improving your production quality, definitely subscribe to the channel. All that being said and done, I will see you in the next video.